All right. Well, I see that it is 1 p.m. Central Time, and I just want to welcome everyone. I am sure that the numbers of attendees are going to continue to go up as folks transition from their last engagement or last meeting today. My name is Heather Starrett. I work for NOAA's Office for Coastal Management, and on behalf of NOAA and the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, I want to welcome participants to our official Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience Initiative kickoff meeting. This is the first engagement that we have held, and so it is officially our first opportunity to share with folks information about the new partnership that we have rolling out for Lake Michigan. To get us started today, we are looking very forward to several distinguished guests giving some opening remarks. And to start us off first is Dr. Jeff Payne from NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. Jeff?
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. And thanks, everybody, for being here today for the kickoff, as Heather said, of the Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience Initiative. Very exciting. I'd like to offer a special welcome to our distinguished guests today, including Mayor McKinney, you'll hear from shortly, our core partners for this initiative, municipal leaders, coastal managers, and all those representing coastal municipalities and communities throughout the Great Lakes region, but especially those adjacent to Lake Michigan. I have a particular personal fondness for the Great Lakes and surrounding watersheds, having spent years canoeing the waters of Lake Huron and Lake Superior both, and also the rivers and lakes of Northern Ontario. And I very recently had the pleasure of joining the Army Corps of Engineers and hearing from our Illinois Coastal Zone Manager, Diane Tessick, and her staff and local partners about the great things that are going on to address hazard issues, erosion, and coastal restoration requirements along the southwest shore of Lake Michigan in particular. The Great Lakes are experiencing unprecedented changes in water levels, coastal erosion and deposition, sediment transport and suspension, and increased flooding, all of which can lead to decreased water quality and habitat loss. And therein lies the challenge. How do we increase the resilience and well-being of our coast and our coastal communities? Now, we know from experience that almost every challenge begets opportunity. It's a good thing. And we have opportunity before us. We are coming together here today and downstream to try to work together to make our communities stronger. For example, by implementing innovative nature-based approaches that help our communities adapt to longer-term gradual changes and to withstand and recover from short-term hazards of all kinds. Decision makers and citizens must understand coastal hazards and climate change at varying timescales and magnitudes, as well as the actions needed to reduce the risk of injury or loss to human communities, to our natural resources, and to our built environment. And those actions need to be underpinned by the best science and the best technology and techniques available, and apply those accordingly. And this project is designed to do just that. NOAA's Office for Coastal Management is proud to embark on a new municipal scale partnership with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, armed with intelligence from a regional coastal erosion survey and coastal expertise across the board, and with funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, a tremendous partner in the region. We are working on a series of trainings, technical assistance support sessions, and workshops aimed first at Lake Michigan municipalities. I want to thank all of you for your interest in learning more about this opportunity and for building coastal resilience in Lake Michigan together. We have high expectations about the benefits of this work and what it will produce, especially via your involvement and partnership. And I'm pleased now to introduce an unwavering municipal advocate and esteemed partner for this endeavor, John Altenberg, from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. We're looking forward to working with NOAA on this initiative. This issue of shoreline resilience is a big issue to our cities and a very expensive issue to our cities. We have with us today Mayor McKinney from Zion, Illinois. The mayor has a very interesting background, both playing in the NBA and also coaching the NBA. He can tell you lots of stories about Michael Jordan and a number of other teams. But when he left that line of work, he decided to give back to his community and join and become eventually the mayor of Zion. So we're very happy to have him here. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, John. And a big thanks to Dr. to Dr. Payne and his colleagues with NOAA. We really appreciate the critical work you do, and we're excited to collaborate you on this important initiative to help coastal communities develop solutions to shoreline threats. As John said, I'm Billy McKinney. I'm the mayor of Zion. And on behalf of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, I am pleased to welcome everyone today and help kick off this important work. As John said, I've been in local politics for 6 years, 4 as a commissioner of building, property, and zoning. In the last 2 years, I've been the mayor. I spent 40 years before doing this, playing in the NBA and then also being on the executive staff of several teams, one currently in the NBA Finals right now, the Milwaukee Bucks. Zion, Illinois is a city with 25,000 people, just about 25,000 people in population. It's in the far northeast corner of Illinois, about 5 minutes from the Wisconsin border. And what I've seen over the years is with coastal erosion, we have a highway, State Highway 173, that runs from the highway down to the lake. And for the past 30 or 40 years, due to coastal erosion, homes that were there and businesses that were there are no longer there, and the road has been barricaded, so we can't get down to the lake. Recently, since I've been back, I've been aware of an issue with erosion in our intake pipe at our 17th Street plant. Now, this intake plant and pipe impacts Zion. It distributes water to Zion, Winthrop Harbor, Illinois Beach Resort, State Beach Resort, which is one of the top 3 tourist attractions in the state of Illinois. It also, we distribute water to Beach Park and the North Point Arena. So each year we're battling the coastal erosion with this intake pipe and hoping that we keep getting funding and the infrastructure necessary to protect this intake pipe. As we all know, mayors and elected officials are on the front lines of confronting impacts from climate change, and responding to this challenge is a top priority for my fellow mayors with the Great Lakes Cities Initiative. We know firsthand the stress that climate change is putting on our physical infrastructure and ecosystems, as well as our city budgets. As we know, the needs we have facing are immense. The city's initiative recently developed a survey that found that coastal communities will need nearly $2 billion over the next 5 years to combat coastal damages from climate change. Now, this is just a partial estimate, and the true need is likely much bigger. So I'm really excited to help launch this initiative that will provide coastal communities with the knowledge, the skills, and capacity to proactively plan for a more resilient future for our shorelines. Thank you again, everyone, for having me today, and to all those who have made this initiative possible. We're eager to see the outcomes of this critical work to advance sustainable solutions to the impacts from climate change and strengthen the resilience of our coastlines. Thank you very much, and now I'll turn it back over to John.
John, you are muted, just so that you know.
That would help, trying to be a good Zoom participant and failed there. Well, thank you, Mayor, for those comments. I think hearing from Marion McKinney, you can hear how important this issue is to us and to our mayors and to all the municipalities around the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence. And Mayor McKinney is a great spokesman for our organization to communicate that need. And Jeff, thank you again for your comments and for your partnership. And I'll turn it back over to Heather.
Thanks, John. And I will just say my own word of thanks to Mayor McKinney, you, John, and Jeff for your opening remarks. So very helpful for setting the stage for our opening and initial webinar today. Couple things just to get us started. Want to introduce the NOAA team that's going to be supporting this effort over the next 2 years. And folks are going to be hearing from several of them throughout the day today, but just to kick us off, Tasha Allen. She's going to wave on her screen so that folks can see her. She's our meeting facilitator, webinar facilitator for the day today. She's also going to be helping us with some of the training downstream. Becky Nicodemus is our learning services coordinator, focusing entirely here in the Great Lakes region. And so if you don't know Becky or haven't yet worked with Becky on any of the NOAA learning services offerings, she is your point of contact here. And I'm happy to introduce her as another asset that folks can leverage going forward with this work. And finally, but certainly not least, is Brandon Crumweedy. He is our regional geospatial services coordinator. If it's about data or any questions about remote sensing technologies, and really his intellect and depth of knowledge goes far beyond those topics, he is going to be another NOAA asset that folks can utilize as this project work unfolds here over the next 2 years. So these folks are going to be supporting the project. You're going to be hearing more from them throughout the day today. There are several other partners, and I'm going to ask us to advance the slides, that I want to mention today. We have been working extensively since about May of last year with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative to really identify what the municipal needs are. And I'm sure many of the participants on today's webinar have seen the survey that has been distributed. We're going to talk more about that. But really, this has been a long-term discussion and series of conversations with municipal officials to really understand those needs, and then to set forth a plan, an initiative, if you will, that really helps us roll out a comprehensive program for municipal governments to leverage going forward in this regard. Some of the key partners that we are bringing to the table to make that possible include NOAA's core partnerships with the coastal zone management programs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. Those are our state partners, alongside of Dewberry and Limnotech, who are our primary consulting firms supporting the workshop work and the technical assistance components of this project. And then behind the scenes, a tad, but very, very important work is being conducted by the University of Michigan's SEAS program. We have several graduate students who are working on validating some of the results that have come out through the erosion survey that has gone region-wide, and several of the information feedback loops that we will encounter throughout this project work will also be important for the graduate capstone projects that the students are working on. So that pretty much summarizes the folks who are going to be working in partnership alongside of us to conduct this work. And we really did want to emphasize that this is an impressive team that's being set up for technical and logistical components of this work. We're just really excited to have all these folks on board, and we're really excited to offer their expertise and their services as additional capacity building elements, because one of the things that we've heard loud and clear is that coastal expertise in dealing with some of these wicked challenges along our Great Lakes coastlines right now is really a shortfall of what we need to be able to address the problems that we're seeing in terms of scope and magnitude. So I'm going to turn things over now to Tasha, and Tasha's going to get us started with a couple of exercises right off the bat. Tasha?
Okay, great. Thank you, Heather. Hello, everybody. I'm Tasha Allen. Heather introduced me earlier. I'm going to be your facilitator for today's meeting. So glad to have you all here. Welcome. Just a few logistical items. As you can see, we're in listen only mode today. That's just due to the size of the webinar, but we do have several ways for you to interact and share your thoughts and ideas with us. We definitely want to hear your questions and your comments. So if you'd like to share ideas or thoughts or comments, please do that in the chat, and you'll see some of those buttons down at the very bottom. And then we also have a Q&A. So if you have a specific question, please share that in the Q&A, and that'll help us organize our Q&A session. We will have a dedicated Q&A session near the end of this webinar. So please share your questions as you're listening. We definitely want to hear those and be able to address those. Also want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, and that information will be shared as well. We can get you more on that. So let's see, I've got my slide up here. Okay, just wanted to let you know a little bit about what we're covering today to provide you some background information and context for this initiative. We just did our introductions, and in a second, I'm going to have you introduce yourselves through the chat. Also, Brandon and Matt are going to talk more about Great Lakes coastal impacts and coastal resilience needs. Then Heather's going to dig deeper into the Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience Initiative that she was just talking about. And then we would like you to stay till the end, because Becky is going to provide information on how to access the expression of interest form to participate in this initiative, and also some additional learning opportunities. We're going to be conducting some trainings, and so we don't want you to miss out on that information. So please hang in with us until the end. And then last, we're definitely going to have that Q&A session so that we can address some of your questions. So this is just a great opportunity to learn more and ask those questions. So now that you've got to know us a little bit and a tiny bit about this project, and we'll get more into those details, we'd like to know who's joining us today. So I'm going to enter in the chat. I'd like you to be able to share your, let's see, your agency, organization, affiliation, and location, just to see kind of who's here. I can see that we have quite a few people here, so I'd like to kind of know where everybody's joining from and who you're with. Okay, we've got folks from Wisconsin. These things are always coming in fast. Looks like we've got an assortment of different people. Wisconsin, we have Michigan. Let's see, Illinois. It's great just to see the kind of the expanse that we're covering here, and all the different people that are interested in this initiative. So we have some Ontario folks. Good range of different organizations here. We've got Illinois Coastal Program. We've got some folks from New York. We've got Wisconsin Coastal Program. Okay, we have the Chicago Midwest region. We have consultants. This is great. I mean, this is very exciting. I know that there was a lot of outreach for this kickoff meeting, so it's very exciting to see that it is reaching people that intended to reach, and that there's such a nice range of people from different geographies, and that also, you know, different organizations as well. So keep entering those. We're definitely are going to go back and look at this. Very excited to see everybody here. So just want you to feel welcome, kind of sit back and listen to what we have to share here, and definitely ask those questions. And so keep sharing in the chat where you're from and your affiliation. And so at this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to Brandon and Matt to share a little bit more about coastal impacts and coastal resilience needs. So Brandon.
All right, thanks, Tasha. If we can advance the slide. So as Jeff helped to set the stage here, you know, we're certainly seeing a lot of the impacts in regards to water levels over the last decade or so, and the direct impacts that we see along the shorelines. And it really is a challenge. You know, how do we accommodate these rapid changes in water levels as they relate to the physical alterations of our shorelines? We know that shorelines are naturally dynamic. They are meant to change over time. But we as humans are also using that same shoreline. And so, you know, having an understanding of those physical impacts, but then how those impacts ultimately play out to the economics and our social lives along the shorelines is also just as important. And so our goal here today, you know, is to work towards the improvement of resilience in our coast and our coastal communities to include the habitat, the natural environments, but also the societal and economic benefits that those alterations may impact, or those benefits provided by providing new nature-based solutions along our shorelines. Next slide. So we don't have to go that far back to think about what impacts we've seen in regards to high water levels in Lake Michigan. Obviously, we've seen the photos of coastal flooding, the new erosion and deposition of those sediments along our shorelines. And then, of course, too, the additional sediment that's being transported along those shorelines. In the case here with this photo, you can see that sediment moving offshore and how that causes alterations to the natural environment, including the streams and river mouths, the wetlands. But as things change over time too, we're losing some of that critical habitat. Case in point, Illinois Beach State Park, where we're doing an on-the-ground exercise to understand the hydrodynamics and alterations with these sediments and what happens when we start to lose these pristine wetland habitats. And of course, with the high water levels, with water staying high, it has a big impact from recent storm events. So coupled that high water with wind, and we definitely start to see these storms almost magnitudes in terms of the energy they bring to our shorelines and alterations over time. And if we go to the next slide, we don't have to go that far back. I was just doing the numbers quick, and within 7 years, we set high record water levels in 2020, and in 2013, we were setting low water level impacts or records as well. And so we see the impacts to include bluff instability as the toe of those bluffs are washed away. But then too, erosion and deposition also plays out during these periods of low water. The alterations to stream and river mouths and the sediment loading that they're capable of producing and depositing into the lakes themselves. We also see that change in wetland habitat. And sometimes it can be a good thing when water levels do go down and we see the expansion of wetland habitat. But oftentimes it's invasive species that move in first, to include Phragmites. And then again, that loss of hydrological connectivity and alterations to groundwater and nearshore waters, surface waters, excuse me. We do see increases in beach width, but then that can lead to things like increased wind sediment transport. And, you know, if you have a house next to the beach and that wind picks up, you may start to see sand blowing in through your screen door. And so these are just some of those physical impacts that we see. But if we go to the next slide, we can see there's also the impacts due to the economy, and also to us as citizens along the shoreline. And so we can definitely see with recent photos, the damage to the coastal infrastructure, our access to the beaches, damage to marinas and docks that can occur both during periods of high water levels, but also during low water levels when those marinas are no longer accessible and able to connect to the lake. We see navigation hazards, again, with both high water levels and low water levels, with materials being floated out during periods of high water levels, but then sandbars and other subsurface hazards impacting navigation and safe vessel operations. That shrinking beaches, again, limiting our access to recreate along the Great Lakes and in Lake Michigan there. And then, of course, where it's really felt is by the loss and damage to private property. And when we see these photos time and time again and hear these stories over and over, you know, this can cause a mental anguish or distress caused by the environmental change, and this is known as nostalgia. And we're starting to hear more and more about that connection between us as individuals along the shoreline and how these changes can impact us over time. Next slide. When we look at the makeup of Lake Michigan, with these three categories alone account for over 75% of the shoreline. About 1/5 of the shoreline is currently hardened or composed of artificial shorelines to include breakwaters, riprap, and anything used right now over the last period of high water levels to protect against these high water level impacts and erosion that we're seeing. And part of that is actually due to what you see in the middle here, with over 30% of Lake Michigan shoreline being composed of fine sediment beaches that are easily to be eroded and transported away. And again, the other piece of this is the other remaining 1/5 of wetlands and the important value that they provide, both as a natural resource, but also to the community in terms of the ecosystem service benefits that they provide. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk more about how do we go about improving coastal resiliency in Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate that. And big thanks to our partners with NOAA for collaborating with us and bringing the municipal voice to the table for meeting this challenge. Again, my name is Matt Doss. I'm the U.S. Policy Advisor for the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. And I'm pleased to be here to report on some of our work and results from our recently completed Coastal Resilience Needs Assessment Survey. As Mayor McKinney noted, our member mayors are really on the front lines confronting impacts to coastal resources. And as Brandon noted, in the last couple of years, we've seen some of the highest lake levels on record. And so our mayors have really been challenged to address this. And it's been clear that this needs to be a top priority for us. Next slide, please. So just real quickly, I want to give a little bit of background on the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. We are a binational coalition of more than 135 US and Canadian mayors working to advance and protect and restore the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River. We were formed in 2003 by the then mayors of Chicago and Toronto. And over the years, we've grown our membership and have over time worked on most of the major issues affecting Great Lakes local governments. Over the last year or so, in particular, we've been focusing on advocating for COVID relief funding for states and cities whose economies have been devastated by the COVID pandemic. We also have been working on water equity to address issues like lead contamination and affordability. Also, water infrastructure funding is an ongoing challenge, and we, of course, are very encouraged by the bipartisan work that's underway in Congress, and we are making sure that the voices of our mayors are heard as that package moves forward. And finally, with regard to our focus today, as I noted, coastal erosion has been a huge challenge for our member mayors. So we took this on last year or two, and as we started thinking about how we could best serve our mayors, we really felt like we needed to have better information about the scope and scale of the impacts that they're facing, some of the level of capacity and knowledge that cities and their staff have, what some of their needs are, the resources that they're currently using, the resources that they need. And so to better answer those questions and to better equip us to help our mayors, we kicked off a Coastal Resilience Needs Assessment Survey. We launched this in March and mostly closed it out in May. And we worked very closely with NOAA, and I want to thank them and all their staff for the technical support they provided in the survey methodology. We also worked very closely with the University of Illinois' Applied Research Institute that helped us, again, with the survey platform and methodology. And this has been a lot of work, but it's really provided us with critical information. And we think really is one of the first times that this kind of comprehensive survey of Great Lakes local governments has been conducted with a focus on coastal resilience. Next slide, please. So just quickly, our survey, as I said, was sent out to both US and Canadian jurisdictions on the shoreline. This included cities, counties, villages, townships, park districts, port authorities, tribes, and regional planning organizations. We received about 300 responses from nearly 250 separate coastal jurisdictions. This slide shows the breakdown among the Great Lakes states and provinces. So we were very pleased with the response rate. And again, we think this is going to provide us with some really important information. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just quickly highlight some of the findings, and I'll try not to kind of read these slides explicitly, but basically, we're finding that the vast majority of communities are highly or moderately concerned about coastal issues, and more than 2/3 are seeing an increased interest in coastal issues. So this is not surprising given the impacts that we've seen in recent years, but really shows that this is a major issue for Great Lakes jurisdictions and one that's of growing concern to them. Some of the most common concerns that were identified include coastal erosion, flooding and high lake levels, high water levels, and then impacts on natural features, beaches, and local parks. Next slide, please. And the other thing that we really wanted to better understand is what level of spending have coastal jurisdictions been required to invest in recent years, and what are they projecting to spend in coming years? And this was really kind of a gap in our knowledge. We know that we knew that cities had been spending a lot of money on erosion and flooding, and we expected that they were looking at anticipated spending in coming years, but we didn't really have a sense of the scope and scale. So we asked jurisdictions how much they had spent over the last 2 years, and that figure is nearly $900 million to respond to coastal challenges. And then we also asked them to what their anticipated spending was over the next 5 years. And that came out to almost $2 billion. And just within the last week or so, we've gotten some additional data from a couple of the major jurisdictions on the Great Lakes that really is going to put that number well over $2 billion. And I just want to emphasize that that still is a conservative figure because it doesn't capture all the jurisdictions around the Great Lakes. So again, more than $2 billion is what we project to be the spending that's needed in the next 5 years to respond to coastal resilience challenges. And the respondents emphasized the importance of funding for mitigation projects and planning, but also noted that existing funding just does not meet current needs. Next slide, please. In terms of resources and capacity, just about a quarter of communities said that their staff were highly knowledgeable about coastal issues, and just about 10% felt that they had a high level of capacity. So I think this really speaks to the need to work with coastal jurisdictions and local governments to provide additional training and technical expertise for their staff, and also to help them build capacity, whether that's through additional staff or bringing on consultants or working with organizations like us or the Coastal States Organization or other entities to help add capacity at the local level. They noted that support from state and federal agencies is very important, but that the current support does not meet their current community needs. And the vast majority conveyed an interest in participating in future training or capacity building or partnership development opportunities. So I think that really speaks to the importance of this new Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience Initiative to help build that training, provide additional capacity and partnership development. Next slide, please. Just quickly, we asked the communities the type of current planning activities that they're involved with. Most communities said they were already taking action on comprehensive planning updates, collecting data, updating zoning codes and ordinances, and implementing coastal resilience projects or practices. At the same time, most communities reported they're lacking progress related to monitoring the effectiveness of their efforts and developing climate action plans. Next slide, please. In particular, most communities said that they are behind in efforts to develop climate action plans, with only less than a third saying that they have already started or completed work in that area. And only about half of the respondents indicated they're incorporating strategies to plan for, or accommodate, or adapt to changing coastal conditions. And finally, of the activities that were not taking place, communities rated vulnerability assessments and coastal resilience projects as critical priorities for them. So again, I think this really speaks to the value of the services that this initiative is going to provide. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do, and we will be looking at this initiative together with a variety of other activities to help respond to the needs that we've seen from this survey. I also want to just again note that, as Heather noted, we are collaborating with a group of graduate students at the University of Michigan who are going to be engaging in about a 1.5 year graduate student project to build on these survey findings, to better assess what these needs are and develop resources and tools to help respond to the needs of local governments. Those graduate students are reaching out to survey respondents. So some of you on the line may have already heard from them, and we really hope that you can take a few minutes to do a follow-up interview with them to help us better understand the nuances of your needs. Next slide, please. So that's all I have today. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. This slide shows the city's initiative staff who will be working on the project together with NOAA. John Alterberg is our executive director. I'm the U.S. policy advisor, and my colleague Tori Graves is our policy consultant, who is also on the line today. So please feel free to reach out to any of us, and we look forward to working with all of you. And we look forward to working with NOAA and building on this work to help our members and other local units of government. So I will turn it back over to Tasha to take it from here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Matt, so much. And thank you, Brandon. Y'all did a great job of talking about the different types of coastal impacts we're seeing, and then also our current resources and capacities that are contributing to our Great Lakes resilience, but also where we may have some gaps in some of those resources and capabilities. To help us learn a little bit more about the issues that y'all are experiencing related to coastal habitat and species loss, we have two questions. So the first question is really focused on what communities are experiencing this coastal habitat and species loss, either through erosion or some other physical stressors, and where in your community specifically is this happening. So I'm going to put a question in the chat for you all to respond here. And just looking for you guys to share, if this is happening in your community, and if so, just letting us know kind of yes, and which community in that specific location. And feel free to share some of those stressors too, if you'd like to kind of give us some more information. So I've just put that question in the chat. Give you guys a couple of minutes to answer that. Okay, we're starting to get some responses coming in here. Looks like we have some habitat loss in the Highland Park area of Illinois. So there's a forest preserve there. There's also in Zion, Illinois, at the Beach State Park there. Thank you, Mayor McKinney. We're also seeing Kenosha. There is some high lake levels and intense storm events are causing erosion. Okay, we have some in Waukegan, Illinois. Okay, I have some in the city of Manitowoc, Wisconsin. So Susan sharing that there's losses of beaches in Beverly Shores, degraded dunes. Yeah, so Justin, we're definitely going to talk a little bit more, and part of this effort is to talk a little bit more about some of those natural solutions in addition to or besides armoring. So in the Bay of Green Bay, we have loss of beach. So we're seeing quite a few folks mentioning loss of beach area, shoreline erosion, dune erosion. But there's been some armoring done. Definitely the changing water levels have created a lot of these impacts. high wave energy. That's okay, Kelly. We're very interested in what folks are doing outside of the Lake Michigan basin. Okay. So we're definitely seeing that there's definitely a need from this. I mean, Matt shared that need, and the information data that Brandon shared as well is showing that due to some of these changes, we're having these different impacts that are definitely causing erosion and all different kinds of erosion, and also impacts to the coastal habitat. So I have another question for y'all, and it's related, and it's Matt talked a little bit about some of the challenges basically in kind of our capacity and resources. So I'm gonna I want y'all to keep sharing on definitely that question number one, but I also have another question for y'all, and it is, what's the biggest challenge for your community to address coastal habitat loss? And so we asked you about kind of, if you are experiencing some of these losses, where are those locations? But basically, what's standing in your way to be able to address some of the, to be able to address coastal habitat loss, either through erosion or some of these other stressors that are happening. And we really are interested in you getting as specific as possible. So if funding is one of those barriers, elaborate on what about funding. Is it writing proposals? Is it managing grants? Is it finding money? If it's a capacity challenge, is it knowledge gaps? Is there a specific training you need? Is there not enough staff? If it's focused around implementation, what specifically about implementation is standing in your way? So we're really interested in you getting kind of specific there. Okay, yes, that private land ownership can definitely be a barrier to what you're able to do and not do. Okay, so Heather, Grace shared that, the technical skills to develop a long-term strategy, and definitely lack of the funding to implement any long-term strategies. I think that is something that's definitely a challenge for many communities. Yeah, being able to have those project ideas, so long-term sustainable nature-based solutions. Right, and how do you prioritize with limited funds and uncertainty? That's definitely something that we see coming up. Yeah, and Kendall, you bring up a great point about changing mindsets. For so long, we may have used a hardened shoreline approach, and so helping people understand what living shorelines are able to do, and also where some of their limitations are too. Yes, and we hear that too, Melissa, about the limited staff time to be able to apply for grants and be able to manage those grants as well. Yes, and definitely smaller communities that have really high impact, so there's limited capacity there. Yes, and just having kind of that agreement about what some of these impacts are, and what approaches that we take to address those. All right. Well, please continue to share these. We value your all's feedback, and this information is very helpful for us as we continue to learn about the barriers and the issues that you all are dealing with. I think that these are very helpful. So I see that Heather, that's my cue. Heather's back on camera, and so I'm going to turn it over to Heather to talk more about, kind of what we can do to address some of these coastal habitat and species losses, and how some of that action can be taken through the Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience Initiative. So Heather, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Tasha. So this is where we kind of get down to brass tacks in our presentation about what this initiative really means, what it is and what it isn't, and also kind of outline some of the procedures, some of the lessons learned that we've experienced through other methodologies that we've deployed, as well as just some of the exciting opportunities that are on the horizon. So maybe to get us started, you've already heard a lot from both Matt and Brandon about the habitat loss, the risks and impacts both to our local economies, recreation and tourism. Really, what we're seeing, and I'm going to talk specifically to Lake Michigan, but this is true certainly across the entire Great Lakes. We are seeing very extensive coastal erosion rates in Lake Michigan. And as has already been noted, one only needs to do a quick Google search online of Lake Michigan coastal erosion, and you can search any time frame really, and it will come back with very significant hits. Just a couple of examples to share with the group. I don't know how many of you may have seen recently, Dan Egan put out a piece in the New York Times that was very much focused on Chicago and the battles of the city in trying to live through climate change and what the lake is doing as a result and how that impacts communities. You'll see a couple of quick screenshots up on the screen. One shows homes that are actually falling into Lake Michigan. This is a shot from from the state of Michigan. There's also an article that popped up in my feed from the state of Indiana, and we've already mentioned Illinois and Wisconsin are also seeing these types of events. So the erosion rates are pretty significant. What's important to note here, and where we're really trying to hone in, is on the multiple benefits of understanding those erosion rates and what is at risk. So when we think about species of interest at either the state or federal level, there are several species that really do rely upon these nearshore environments. The sort of poster child, in my opinion, that we could talk about, but certainly is not the only species, would be piping plover. And there's a little cute picture up on the screen of that bird, really dependent upon the amount of beach available for nesting. We see very few of these species actually able to come back and use the beaches, especially under a high water level scenario. So that's just one example of many. When we think about the funding for this project being through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, we really are going to think about how we can achieve multiple benefits by focusing on restorative elements in the nearshore coastal region. We know that our shorelines are pretty hardened. If you looked at the data that Brandon shared, we did a fully extensive region-wide survey of hardening of our shorelines. It was completed in 2019. And while Brandon's slide only showed data from Lake Michigan, we have that data across the entire basin, with that number kind of rolling in at the 20% range. What's important to know is that that's kind of our baseline going forward, but we do have some data going back all the way to 2009. And if we look at the rate of change, that interannual and then decadal change over time, it's very significant in terms of the increasing trend that we see there. So the bottom line is our coastal hazards are significant. We're really seeing both the frequency and severity of these types of hazards and the impacts that we're seeing on the ground on the rise. It's very concerning, and especially when you look at it through the lens of a municipal official, our mayors, for example, who are trying their best to look at the return on investment, the cost impacts, insurance claims. Those are also on the rise. A $2 billion number that Matt shared just gives folks a bit of an understanding around scope and magnitude of the issue, such that, and if we can go to our next slide, it becomes really important for us to think differently about how we're going to approach these problems. No longer can we think about things in a siloed sort of perspective, but really we need to be asking ourselves, where is it that we see the greatest rate of change? What are the risks and vulnerabilities that we see on the ground? What's the level of risk we're willing to accept? And on top of that, what are we willing to invest, and how long will those investments last over the long haul? So this is a good example, just a quick screenshot We've had the sheer benefit and pleasure of working with our Illinois coastal zone management partners at the Illinois Beach State Park facilities. You'll see the larger graphic that is shown here really demonstrates the geology of what is the Beach Ridge in Illinois Beach State Park. We've been working alongside of all the partners. You'll see the logos on the bottom of the screen to really identify what is a very significant pilot project at Illinois Beach State Park to develop some offshore reefs. Those are a nature-based solution approach to slowing that sediment transport cycle down to where that sand isn't leaving. We aren't seeing critically endangered Ramsar listed wetlands and dunes disappear from an area that really are truly unique international listings. So we've been working extensively with them and with many of the partners listed there to help inform the decision making and the planning, engineering, and design work for this pilot. What's exciting about it is that it's very much grounded in science. You'll see that there's a new article that was published in the International Journal for the Great Lakes by Ethan, one of the Illinois Geological Survey and Michigan academics that are working on this project alongside of our state partners. So this is a good example, but it shouldn't and isn't the only one that we want to share. So next slide. What we're excited about with this work is that it really does give us an opportunity to hone in, not just through our state partnerships, but also working alongside of the local governments and thinking about what are those needs at the municipal scale. We have identified this project work and jointly pitched it from a NOAA and Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities initiative perspective to federal partners, EPA being the primary one through the Glenpoe office, to talk about the benefits of going with the nature-based approach over the next 2 years. What we're thinking about in terms of the holistic program that's outlined here is really a 2-year process, just to kind of start us out in 2 phases, breaking down each year. The first year is really going to be focused on the initial needs that have been identified through the survey mechanisms and other feedback loops. We know that there's a need. We just heard some of the feedback real time from those of you on the line today that folks really do need some technical support going into this. So we have training curriculums through our digital academy. Those are going to be leveraged. You'll hear a little bit more about that going forward. We're going to make those available as a first step. Let's get smart about what we could do and what the costs are of various options. We are going to build in right from the start through our private sector partners on this particular project work, technical support to identify those projects on the ground that really need attention, whether it's funding or engineering and design work, or just laying out what data sets are necessary to really inform those next actions on the ground. And then as a final step in this first year, we are going to convene 4 workshops. 4 because we're going to hold 1 in each of the Lake Michigan states, aimed at a target audience that really reflects the municipal governments. Now, that said, we do plan on making sure we have subject matter experts, including our state coastal managers, our state DNR and wildlife programs. We'll make sure that we have subject matter experts in coastal engineering, geology, hydrology, all of the basic sciences that perhaps you may not have on staff right now, but could really use that expertise in thinking about your project work going forward. For phase 2, once we have those workshops, our goal at the end of the day is to have, yes, a report from each of those workshops, but more importantly, a list of well thought out projects with project templates that actually describe what would happen on the ground, what the costs are, estimates, and who the various partners are that are going to be involved in that project work on the ground. One of the things that we see quite often is the benefit of getting folks together, and with COVID that has been very much limited. We are hoping to be able to conduct these workshops in person. And so our hope is that that will offer up an opportunity for folks to actually network and do the necessary partnership ad hoc type of engagement that we really have had an absence in over the last year and a half. For phase 2, this is where we really kind of get down to the funding that's been mentioned as a barrier and a need. We are going to be looking at the outputs from the workshops to prioritize and select, well, I should say prioritize a list of projects and then ultimately select the top ranking projects for potential engineering and design work out of the gates. We have limited funding, so I should manage that expectation appropriately, but we have been down this path before. And so let me just speak to what we've learned and what we have experienced through a similar initiative. Next slide. Back in 2018, we started working with our state coastal zone management programs and the Coastal States Organization to conduct similar workshops at a state level, very much focused on our state partners and what their needs were. Different target audience, but same sort of process that we were looking at. What we didn't know was really that there was a significant training and technical support up front. So we didn't have those components in our last go round. We finished those workshops in 2019, having 8 workshops reports and over 30 highest prioritized projects across all 8 of the Great Lakes states. That was a huge lift, and it was a very significant outcome. For the first time, we actually had a list of 30 projects to choose from, which had already been prioritized within the states for us to begin to think about how we could socialize, daylight the project work, and then ultimately get funding to do the engineering and design work up front. As most of you know, without the engineering and design plans, it makes it very hard for us to make an argument that any particular project is shovel ready and therefore ready to move out for permitting, and the next step would be for construction. This process that we ran in 2018 and 19, number one, we've learned from, we've added additional components to really help with that upfront capacity need and technical support, but we also have seen those 30 projects. We have completed our first round of engineering and design for over, I think it was for 4 projects out of the gate, 3 to 4 projects. We are now already seeing agencies, whether they be state, federal, or otherwise, maneuver and position themselves to be able to fund the next step, which would be the construction phase. It's been a delight to see that process from start to finish really pay off in dividends. And so we really do think that it's a good model to follow. We've made some improvements, but it's a time-tested and proven methodology that we hope to execute at a municipal scale going forward. Next slide. So that brings me to outcomes and returns on investments. This is absolutely an opportunity to think differently, to act differently. We are looking for resilient, nature-based coastal projects for the long haul investment. We know that this needs to focus on habitat and species as the primary objective. Again, making sure that we are well aligned with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, Habitat and Species Focus Area 4 objectives and measures of progress as a first line. But it is also true that we will see multiple benefits from any said investment. For example, returns on recreation and tourism. For example, there are ways to build in infrastructure desires. There are also ways to look at improving your economy through jobs and tourism and recreation. So those are all good things to think about. This is an opportunity to build capacity, gain expertise, daylight projects, socialize those projects. We're going to be talking more about digital coast and data needs throughout this, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Becky. But we also are looking to really drill down and start to access those municipal scale projects, because we do see that as a gap and an area where we could be doing more. I've already mentioned the opportunity to network with partners. And then finally, not this fall, but next spring, we are already thinking about ways to work across federal agencies and other partners who have financial streams available to help finance and move things along from a funding perspective. So with that, I will just say we are very excited, in fact, eager to work with all of you on this work. I know Becky has more information about how you can express your interest and talk a little bit more about training. And so I'm going to turn things over to her now. Becky.
All right, thank you, Heather. So next slide. All right, so if you are, that's my daughter also chiming in if you heard her. So if you are interested in the Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience Initiative for your community, please fill out this brief expression of interest form by Tuesday next week, July 27th. So Tasha will include the link to the form, there it is in the chat. But the deadline is next week, as I said, but you can start filling it out as early as right now. So the contact information submitted through this form will be used for all future communication on this initiative. So including training dates and how to register, when technical support will be available and how to request it, information on the workshops and how to register, etc. So even if your community, you or your community is on the fence about participating in this initiative, I recommend filling out the form so that you can be in the loop. So, and if in the future it becomes apparent that your community will not be participating, we can remove you from the email list if you desire. So fill out this form, even if you are interested in participating in only one part of this initiative. So as Heather was discussing, there's multiple parts of this initiative. If you're, for instance, outside of the Lake Michigan Basin, but you're interested in the training aspect, we will provide seats as we can. So please do fill out the form. And there's an open-ended question, just one of those at the end of the form where you can indicate why you are interested in this initiative. So if you're interested in just one part of it, just indicate that in to that question. So also consider sharing this form with individuals and communities you think would be interested in this initiative. So for instance, if there's a neighboring community that is experiencing similar coastal issues as yours, it may be that you may work together on a project. So consider sharing the expression of interest form, the link that was shared with them so that they're engaged in this initiative from the beginning. Finally, I think this is the most important point. If you don't fill out this form, we will not know that you and your community is interested in this initiative, particularly since there was no registration form for this kickoff webinar. So please do fill it out. Again, it will be available until 1 week from today, July 27th. All right, next slide, please. All right, save the dates. So as Heather mentioned, the first step of this initiative is training. And first up is nature-based solutions for coastal hazards, which will be offered on August 12th and August 31st. Please just choose one of those dates. We're offering it twice to make sure that there's a good amount of space for people that are interested in the training. So just choose, perhaps what's best for your schedule. And a little bit about this training, nature-based solutions for coastal hazards is a starting point for coastal managers, planners, and decision makers preparing to design and implement natural or nature-based shoreline projects to reduce coastal hazards in their communities. The training consists of two parts. First, there is a 1-hour self-guided online module where training participants learn the foundational concepts before attending the second part, which is a 2-hour online instructor-led training at the dates and times shown on this slide. So during that 2-hour session, participants will virtually interact with peers and experts to learn more about implementing natural and nature-based shoreline solutions, including overcoming challenges. The next training, as you can see here, that's part of this initiative will be on September 14th, and that one is called Diving into the Digital Coast. This will also be virtual. This training helps coastal managers, planners, and decision makers identify and use resources that are available on the digital coast that support coastal resilience and nature-based solutions. The Digital Coast, if you haven't heard of it before, it's a resource for the coastal management community in partnership with it's a resource for the coastal management community provided by our office, NOAA's Office for Coastal Management, in partnership with a number of organizations that help ensure its relevance to the coastal community. It provides not only coastal data, but also tools, training, and information needed to make those data truly useful. So we'll be talking about data that you may need, for instance, for designing a project to increase resilience. And also as part of that training, Michigan's Coastal Management Program will also present on the resources that their program has available to support coastal management and resilience. So we're happy to have them as part of that. So after filling out the expression of interest form, your first communication as part of this initiative will include further information for these training opportunities and the links that you will need to register for those trainings. Next, as Heather talked about, technical support and the workshops will be happening during phase 1 of this initiative, and they'll be coming this fall and winter. And we will provide further information on those parts of the initiative as we move forward. So please, again, fill out the expression of interest form to be in the loop on those. And with that, I would like to turn it back over to Tasha to facilitate a question and answer session. So Tasha.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Appreciate that. So we just shared a lot of information, good information with you all to just let you know about issues that you're experiencing, needs. You know, we hear you when you share information, and also just specifically about this project. So we've had a couple of questions roll in, and I would love to see some more. I'm certain there's lots of questions, but Heather, you had mentioned the workshops that will be in the fall. How many workshops are going to be happening?
Yeah, we have planned for 4. And our hope is that, you know, we're working right now, and we just got our contractors on board. So our hope is that we will socialize locations for that. Part of this is one, being very cognizant about public safety with the current COVID conditions and CDC recommendations. So we will be watching that very closely. Safety is our first concern. We want to make sure it's okay for folks to come in person. I at this point in time, want to just hedge a little bit on sharing locations. We have some in mind. There will be one in each state, at least for if we conduct in person, that is the plan. If we need to go to more of a remote and virtual option, we have also made arrangements for that outcome as a backup plan. So that's what I can offer right now, Tasha, and I'm happy to answer any other questions about that if folks have them.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful to learn a little bit more about what we're thinking and where we're thinking. So I want to throw this back out to our participants. You know, we did share a lot of information. I'm just curious if you have any information on the survey that survey information that Matt shared, or on our project timeline. Becky's just shared an expression of interest, so how you can let us know that you're interested. We also have some training opportunities and learning opportunities coming up. So if you have additional questions, this is your opportunity to ask us some questions. We're here for you. So as folks are thinking through that, I don't know if our team here, if there's anything else that you all would like to share, or things that you get asked frequently that you know would be helpful. So, here's a question that just came in. So hold tight. So let's see here. Are there opportunities for technical experts to present at upcoming workshops? Okay. And how do we sign up for the trainings? I think those might be kind of connected. So who would like to?
So Becky, I don't know if you want to speak up about that, but I would just say, or do you want to take it?
Well, I can say for the training, we have some expertise already lined up for the 2 nature-based solutions for coastal hazards. So we've already reached out to folks, and they've already agreed to present, and that information will be provided in that first communication about who will be part of those nature-based solutions for coastal hazards. But maybe others would like to speak specifically to the technical support piece in the workshops, which we'll be having support from Dewberry and Limno Tech on.
Yeah, and maybe I will just add to that by saying, if there are folks who are doing good work on the ground and you would love to have a little bit of exposure, you know, we're always open to information, resources that we could provide our workshop and training participants that will serve as nice job aids or even examples of the types of things that can be done. So I would just say, please reach back to us, and we would be happy to work with you on figuring out if not a presenter during a training, what might be available as another alternative to help give you some exposure to the audiences here, because we know that, you know, our time is limited and we may not be able to bring in everybody to speak, but we certainly can provide another means by which to share your information.
Oh, and I see a question about, oh yeah, signing up for the training. So the first step is filling out the expression of interest form. So once you do that, then you will get an email. We didn't want to have too many links to register for too many things at once. So once you do that, then you'll receive an email with the registration links for the 3 trainings.
Okay, thank you. And then we did have a question about, as you all are aware, there's, you know, a lot of research and activities going on in the Great Lakes. And one person was interested in finding out, you know, is there a location, one or several locations where these studies could be accessed? And I think it would be helpful if we kind of knew what specifically. I think, Jim, you asked a question, if you could elaborate a little bit more on if there was specific research or studies that you're looking for, then that would better help us direct you if we know about those, and possibly some others related around this topic. And I'm certain that there's, you know, different ones that we know of that we can share as well.
Hey, Tasha, maybe this is an opportunity too for us to just share with the group that we are coordinating through related efforts. So just to mention the Coastal Working Group, which is a GLRI group across 16 different federal agencies and bureaus. So if not NOAA, and if not our abilities or niches or ways to communicate and share information, we have other federal partners who do provide databases of research elements that are easily accessible. And I'm thinking, you know, there's a lot that we could leverage there. So again, just to your point, Tasha, knowing a little bit more about the request will tell us what is possible and how we can point folks back to useful job aids and resources.
Okay, I'm not seeing any additional. Okay, okay. So Jim did give a little bit more detail on sand transport, sediment transport, the erosion surveys. So I think, Jim, so go ahead, Heather.
So I was just going to jump in and say several of our state coastal zone management programs are involved in different communities of practice and or sand management working groups, for example. These are certainly very active forums that perhaps can serve as resources for folks to gather information going forward. And I see Vidya has already responded with some information in the chat, which is great. But again, there really is a lot out there. So being able to define exactly which geography, exactly which state, and what the issue of concern is relative to the coastal hazard will help define the next course of action or advice in terms of where folks can go for more information.
Okay, thank you, Heather and Vidya. Yeah, that's a great great resource here that you shared, Vidya. So I'm just curious if our panel here, our team, if there's any additional information y'all would like to share out with participants, or questions you get asked a lot kind of around this initiative.
So maybe I will just take a leap of faith and say we've had several engagements thus far. Just to mention a couple, we were invited through Matt and John to participate on the Mayor's Coastal Resilience Advisory Group as an observer. We have already heard questions about why Lake Michigan, why not other lake basins? We know that there's a lot of erosion and coastal issues that are happening throughout the Great Lakes. And just to be very transparent and clear, we had to start somewhere. the issues that we're hearing about from municipal officials in Lake Michigan are very significant. They are constantly making headlines. It's also true that the funding for at least a portion of this work is coming through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And because that is a US appropriated fund, we needed to pick a geography that was entirely US based in order to execute with those fund streams. So that provides just a little bit of information about why Lake Michigan, why not other places. We are very aware and again very interested in continuing to hear about the issue in the other lake basins. It is absolutely our intention to look at this as a pilot and see it as a potential area for expansion, geographically speaking, going down the road. So that's one question, Tasha, that we get pretty often.
Okay, that's very helpful. So it looks like, I don't know if everybody's experiencing this, but Sue is saying that not everybody's seeing what's being shared in chat. So Sue, you want to make sure that you have selected. So if you click on the 2 in the bottom of the chat button, I think there's options there where it says all panelists or all panelists and attendees. You want to make sure that that is selected. And please let me know if you're not receiving any information, and we can share information out. If we can reshare those links that were. So do folks have any questions about how to sign up or anything about the training? Any details about the training opportunities coming up?
Vidya, I saw your question about, thanks for flagging the issue that we're in the middle of summer and folks are on vacation. So I saw your question about extending the deadline. I think we'll just be in touch with you, Vidya, offline about Illinois communities. I mean, it'd be great if everyone could express their interest by July 27th, particularly since that first nature-based solutions for coastal hazards training is coming up around the corner on August 12th. But we recognize that this is vacation time, so we definitely don't want to exclude communities because if they happen to miss it by a day or two. So we'll be in touch on that.
Okay. Let's see. I think that we may have gotten all the questions. I don't know if, it's also one of those things where you got to let it all kind of gel in your head and sink in a little bit. So Heather Stewart's contact information will be provided at the end of, or there it is on the screen right there. So, if a question comes up or you would like to chat, Heather can definitely distribute those questions to the team or set up conversations as well. If you have additional questions or things just come up as you're looking through the materials. Okay. Oh, a link to the form. Okay, I'll put that expression of interest. Is that what you're talking about, Matt? I'll put that back up again for folks, just in case it got lost in the text here. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. There's, again, that form that Becky talked about how you can let us know if you're interested. And then that'll let us also know that you're possibly interested in taking some of those training opportunities. Yeah, and how, so we mentioned that this meeting is going to be recorded. Are we going to be sharing that out, or how will that be shared out?
So I think that question might be best answered by the city's initiative partners, but I would just say that to date, we have been working with our city's initiative partners to utilize their website as our primary sort of archiving and storage and announcing web page. We will be building that out with materials as we move along. So we will include a link, for example, under the events page to things that are important for folks to have regular access to. I would for now utilize the city's initiative website as your primary go-to for any information that you might need. That said, it's always helpful to contact one of us and say, hey, how can I get that link? Or I didn't get it, I'm really interested. Please share things with your colleagues because we understand this is a one-time kickoff webinar and There are probably folks who could not be here today. So if you know of another city, you're partnering with an entity that actually has need and want for something like this, a program like this, we just would really appreciate you sharing the information along so that we can cast a pretty wide net, if you will, for folks who might be interested in walking alongside of us here.
All right, well, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Heather, if there's no more additional questions from folks during this time, and just have you wrap it up for us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tasha, and thanks to all the speakers today and the participants who have spent the last hour and 20 minutes with us. We really appreciate your time and we know it's valuable. So moving forward, we have a week outlined to respond to the expression of interest. If you have special needs or concerns with that deadline, yes, by all means, reach out. We will talk with you offline and try to find a workable path forward. We have our contact information. While it's just one name, it's one point of entry, but it may be that multiple folks are best suited to respond to the question that comes in. So I will serve as that initial point of contact, and please do reach out at any time by email and let me know what's on your mind with regard to the work that we've outlined here or any step in the process that we've outlined. I really just want to thank our amazing team. While you all have not yet heard from our contractors, Dewberry and Limnotech, and the student team at UM, I'm sure that there will be ample opportunity to work alongside of them and hear from them in the months coming. And then again, we just really appreciate your time today. We will be making a copy of the chat so that we have the documented responses that you all have offered today. Any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very, very much for your time today.